Notre Dame is off to the national championship game. So, was Brian Kelly the problem in South Bend? I got my thoughts. Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comment below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Got a lot of LSU football to talk about, but the LSU basketball Tigers, the women's basketball Tigers, get a big buzzer-beating win at Tennessee. Quick thought on that. And a national analyst predicts a big-time breakthrough for LSU in 2025, all centered around Brian Kelly, which is kind of where I wanted to begin. On Thursday night, Notre Dame, in dramatic fashion, beat Penn State to advance to its first national championship game since Brian Kelly led Notre Dame to the national championship game following the 2012 season, where, of course, they got obliterated by Notre Dame in, coincidentally, Miami, the same stadium and field where Notre Dame beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl to advance to the College Football Playoff National Championship game. And as soon as that game went final, my Twitter feed was filled with LSU fans wondering, did LSU hire the wrong guy? It was Brian Kelly that was holding Notre Dame back. Notre Dame fans aren't going to love what I'm about to say, but they may not care because their team's playing for a national championship, and that's pretty great. No, Brian Kelly's not the thing that was holding Notre Dame back. Here's a few doses of reality. And I would also tell you that two things can be true at the same time. Okay. Marcus Freeman can be a really good coach who's doing a really good job. That's true. Brian Kelly, also a really good coach who did an amazing job at Notre Dame and had probably taken that program as far as he or anyone in that system was going to take Notre Dame, especially with the way Notre Dame was allowing coaches to build programs or not allowing them to build programs. It's all things I've talked about a lot over the years. From academic restrictions to just being in Northwest Indiana, not a great place. If y'all lived there for a year, not a lot of appeal. Notre Dame for years had one gigantic advantage. They were on TV every day. And when everyone's on TV now, the lone singular advantage that Notre Dame had outside of its history went away because everybody's on TV now. But what I would like to remind you of is this. First of all, Marcus Freeman's in year 3. And he has Notre Dame in a national championship game. Brian Kelly in year 3 had Notre Dame in a national championship game. But Brian Kelly inherited a program that hadn't won anything of significance in 20 years. And Marcus Freeman inherited a program that Brian Kelly had nationally relevant every year. As a matter of fact, Notre Dame in 2021, Brian Kelly's last year as the head coach, was 11-2. They finished 5th in the final playoff standings. They were one spot out of the college football playoffs. As a matter of fact, Brian Kelly's last 5 seasons in South Bend from 2018 to 2021, they won 10, 12, 11, 10, and 11 games, twice making the college football playoff. If you go back and look at some context, Notre Dame won the national championship in 1988. That was their last championship. Lou Holtz's final season in South Bend was 1996. His last double-digit win season was 1993. They went 11-1. From 1994 until Brian Kelly was hired in 2010, Notre Dame had 2 double-digit win seasons. They went 10-3 in 2002 under Tyrone Willingham. And in 2006, they went 10-3 under Charlie Weiss. That's it. 2. From 1994 until 2010, Notre Dame had 2 double-digit win seasons. Nobody found a way to bring that school to prominence. In 12 years, Brian Kelly had 7 double-digit win seasons, twice made the 4-team college football playoff, and advanced to the BCS championship game when, again, it was just a 2-team field. So Marcus Freeman has now got Notre Dame into the national championship game, which Brian Kelly also did. And maybe Marcus Freeman will win the national championship. And if he does, fantastic. He's a great coach. And I don't know that Notre Dame's offense is quite good enough maybe to keep pace with either of the teams they'll play, either Texas or Ohio State. But it's also objectively true that Marcus Freeman inherited a great situation. Notre Dame was 5th in the country in Brian Kelly's final season when he took the job at LSU. They missed the playoff by 1 spot. It is also objectively true that were we not in a 12-team playoff era, that this Notre Dame team would have finished like every other Notre Dame team, except the ones that Kelly coached, outside of a playoff. They're in because of the expanded field. And that's fantastic. I love this, by the way. I think we should go to 16 because Notre Dame has proven the value of a playoff. I don't need people in a hotel ballroom in suburban Dallas telling me who the best teams are based on game control and defensive efficiency metrics. Go play it on the field. I mean, do you realize that if we didn't have the college football playoff, the 12-team playoff, the 4 teams in this field would have been Oregon against Penn State and Georgia against Texas. Those would have been your 4 teams. Ohio State wouldn't have been in. Notre Dame wouldn't have been in. And we've already seen Oregon, Penn State, and Georgia all eliminated. So the playoff is working. It's behaving as it should. It's intended to say, hey, go play a regular season and seed your playoff based on what happened in the regular season, and then go play a true tournament and decide an actual champion on the field, which is what's happening, which is fantastic for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame. And I hope it'll be fantastic for LSU next year or sometime in the very near future. But it's very hard to compare the two because they're also existing in very different realities. Brian Kelly getting Notre Dame to the national championship in the BCS is objectively a more impressive thing than what Marcus Freeman is doing because only 2 teams got in. You had to be in the top 2, not the top 12, the top 2. There's some LSU fans who also think at this point that maybe LSU hired the wrong guy. I just fundamentally disagree. Brian Kelly's a great coach. He's won a lot of games at a very high level. I think there have been missteps since he took the LSU job that we've talked about plenty here. There have been, I think he made a mistake by not retaining Greg McMahon. He made a mistake by not retaining Corey Raymond. He made a mistake by hiring Brian Polian as his recruiting coordinator. There were mistakes, and he's worked to fix them. And he's got his staff right. And there were mistakes in the portal, like last year taking 9 guys and none of them impact players. Well, they've driven up revenue and fundraising, and now they've put together a portal class and a high school class and a roster capable of winning a championship. And if LSU's not in the playoff next year, then I think we have a real conversation about Brian Kelly and his ability at LSU moving forward. But if the point today is Notre Dame is in the playoffs, so they got the right guy and LSU didn't, not exactly. And it's not exactly what and what. It's a different era. An expanded playoff allowed Notre Dame in. Again, 2 things can be true at the same time. Marcus Freeman's a great coach. He's doing an awesome job. But Brian Kelly's a really good coach that handed Marcus Freeman a great situation. And I think Brian Kelly will get LSU to that point because he'll have every resource to do it. And he's a good coach who got Notre Dame to a 4-team playoff twice and a BCS championship game. He just couldn't break through because he didn't have the right players. And I think now you're seeing he's going to have a roster that kind of looks like it should in order to get to and win a championship. We'll see if he can next year. But if you're melting today over Notre Dame advancing or worrying about Notre Dame fans saying, see, I told you so, just turn around and tell them the coach that you purport to hate got you to a championship game in year 3 as well. And he inherited a situation where nobody had won there in 20 years. Marcus Freeman was handed a really good situation from a coach that had 5 consecutive double-digit win seasons when he handed him the program. So congrats to Notre Dame for advancing. I'm not sure I give them much of a shot against Ohio State or Texas because, boy, both those teams are so much better offensively than Notre Dame. But it is impressive what they've done. Again, 2 things or multiple things can't all be true. at the same time. So how does LSU move forward? It was interesting because I had a conversation with Blake Toppmeyer, who works for USA Today. And Blake's covered the SEC for a long time. He covered Missouri, he covered Tennessee. Now he's covering college football as a whole, and primarily the SEC. But Blake wrote a column which basically said, hey, if you hate Brian Kelly, get ready to loathe him in 2025 because LSU is about to be really good. I want you to hear some of what Blake had to say, and he did answer the Marcus Freeman, Brian Kelly question as well. So we'll get to that as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by pros. Ready for a stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available at TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Blake Toppmeyer joined my radio show After Further Review, which, if you're interested, you can hear that entire interview with Blake. Podcast, YouTube, just search After Further Review, and you'll see it there. But I did ask Blake that question, and this was just hours before Notre Dame played in the college football playoff semifinal. I asked him if it was Brian Kelly that was holding Notre Dame back.
Yeah, I don't think Brian was the thing holding Notre Dame back. I think, Brian Kelly's success allowed this moment to happen for Marcus Freeman, I think, or it influenced this moment for Marcus Freeman. He uplifted that program onto a higher plane than it had been in many, many years. He restored Notre Dame to prominence, not just in the television ratings, but in the record column. However, there's been other changes in the sport since Brian Kelly left that I think Marcus Freeman met the moment, right? Like we all kind of wondered when NIL and the freedom of transfer movement came along, like how that would affect a school like Notre Dame. Were they going to be real uppity and say, no, we don't do pay for play, and we're not gonna be taking transfers here, or would they kind of roll up their sleeves and get into it? And I think it's been more the latter. Like, we don't have public disclosures of every NIL collective's finances, but we all talk to people, and from what I hear, I think Notre Dame is competitive in the NIL space, and they've been efficient in landing some high-impact transfers. That doesn't mean Marcus Freeman's going to be, rivaling to be the portal king, but Notre Dame's been pretty punchy in adding some impact transfers. So I actually think, they've done a really good job meeting the moment when it comes to NIL and transfers, and Marcus Freeman has something to do with that. Like, I can't say how Brian Kelly would have done in those areas at Notre Dame. I don't know. I do know Marcus Freeman's done well, I think, in those areas, and has been the man for the moment at Notre Dame. But yeah, it's just it's like everything that happened before 2021 versus now. Like, I think we got to view it through a different prism. So, Brian Kelly never won the big one at Notre Dame, but he got him to the big stage. Marcus Freeman has not yet won the big one at Notre Dame, but he's also got them to the big stage and done it in, a different paradigm of college football. But I don't know that means that Brian Kelly couldn't have won, kept winning big at Notre Dame in this era, or we just don't know. But I do think Marcus Freeman was the right man for the moment, and I think Brian Kelly's success before Marcus Freeman probably was a positive factor on Freeman being able to have some success here.
Yeah. Again, multiple things can be true at the same time. That's a senior national football columnist, effectively echoing the same thing I did. Brian Kelly built something at Notre Dame that was the most relevant that program had been for 20 years. And they bumped up against the glass ceiling. And in a new era of NIL, portal, 12-team playoff, Marcus Freeman might be the person to break through it. We'll see. Another game to go. It's also interesting because I asked Blake about LSU, because the reason that I had Blake on my show was he wrote a column. He wrote a column for USA Today that is well, the headline, needless to say, is going to grab an awful lot of people's attention. The headline reads, "Can't stand Brian Kelly now? Wait until LSU coach wins big in the SEC after transfer portal ads." So here's a guy who doesn't cover LSU, doesn't have any link to LSU whatsoever or to Brian Kelly, and thinks LSU is going to be really good in 2025, like potentially national championship good in 2025. Here's my interaction with Blake about why. And I started by asking him where he would slot as of today, and a lot can change, but as of today, where he would have LSU in the hierarchy in the SEC for 2025.
Top 4, I think. And that might be a little bit bold given the season that they had. I mean, this is a few years in a row now where LSU does not look like we expect LSU to look on defense. And there was less progress than I expected there to be this year. There was a little bit, but not nearly enough progress on defense. But when you add up, they have the most proven quarterback in the SEC coming back. I mean, I really like a couple other guys around this conference too. I would, DJ Lagway, I'd love to have him at Florida, sure. And a couple others, but Garrett Nussmeier.
Not to derail you. I'm sorry, Blake, not to derail you. If I gave you one quarterback, one quarterback for 25, pick of any of the lot, I give you one for 25, who would it be?
Lagway or Nussmeier?
Wow, I'm surprised you put Lagway up there, considering the small sample. But anyway, so not to derail, but anyway, go ahead, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys, you think about some guys that are outbound too. Like, there's a lot of guys headed out the door as well. And some people would say Arch. I haven't seen. I feel like I haven't quite seen enough of Arch to put him in that group. And we've got a little bit bigger sample size, I feel like, of Lagway. But anyway, Nussmeier would be my top 2. I've been kind of pounding the drum for Garrett Nussmeier for a while now. Like I feel like I somehow fell backward into like being a member of a board member of the Garrett Nussmeier fan club or something. I just
you're on the Nuss bus, bro. You're driving the Nuss bus.
Yeah, I'm driving the Nuss bus. Yeah, I host a podcast, and my co-host on SEC Football Unfiltered, he's been saying this for years. Like, how did I fall into this position on the Nuss bus? I don't know, but I love his skill set. And I think he had a good season. I think he could have an even better season next year. I don't know that he's totally hit his peak yet. So when you add him up with some of his transfers in, I think top 4 in the SEC is feasible for LSU because they're not operating individually here. You look at what else is going on around the conference. Like Alabama is sort of at a fork in the road moment here, an inflection point with Kalen DeBoer. We don't really know which direction they're going. They signed a good class, but I think next year might be a little bit of a struggle for Alabama. Georgia, their dynasty is receding a little bit. Georgia's not going to all of a sudden become rubbish, but they're not 2021 and 2022 Georgia, and they've got some concerns, I think, in their depth chart next year, including who's going to play quarterback. Tennessee, who made the playoff this year, their roster is in a state of regression. Ole Miss is also smashing it in the transfer portal, but gosh, they're losing a lot of talent, including their quarterback and Jackson Dart. And so I like LSU's positioning. I would have them top 4 in the league. I think Texas is going nowhere. I think Texas is here to stay as long as Steve Sarkisian is there. I mean, they got a nice war chest and a really good coach. Excuse me. And so I think they're here to stay. But yeah, I would like LSU's positioning as it stands here, in early January.
Can't stand Brian Kelly now. Wait until LSU. has a lot. Blake Toppmeyer over at USA Today has an awful lot of good things to say there about LSU for 2025. Alas, we will find out. A lot of reason to be excited, but I can also understand the apprehension from LSU fans who are looking at Marcus Freeman, looking at Notre Dame, wondering, is Marcus Freeman able to do something Brian Kelly couldn't, and why? Well, like everything, there's context and there's nuance to life. But again, Brian Kelly had Notre Dame in this position in year 3 in South Bend, and they got waxed by Alabama. Now, I don't know that there's an Alabama waiting, but Ohio State might be just the next closest thing. All right, we'll wrap up next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Oh, man, my goodness, y'all. The NFL playoffs are here. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. NFL playoffs are coming up, y'all. JD5 getting going in his rookie year. You want to bet on Jaden and the Commanders? You can do it over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. As we put a button on the show here today, quick reminder about LSU women's basketball, which scored a really big win on the road in Tennessee. The Tigers played the 16th-ranked Tennessee Lady Vols, and LSU came up with a buzzer beater to take it 89-87. Actually, pretty remarkable play in the lane. If you didn't happen to see the game, you could find the highlights somewhere, but Kaylin Gilbert with a little runner in the lane, kind of back to the basket, floated it in to give the Tigers an 89-87 lead. And Z Spearman had a look at it for Tennessee to tie it and missed it, wouldn't go. So LSU wins the game 89-87. Tigers move to 18-0, 3-0 in the conference. What's really interesting about this game is, and I know most people were locked into the college football playoff semifinal. And good for you if you were. You're right to. Anissa Morrow was incredible. She had 23 points and 21 rebounds. She had a double-double by halftime, by the way. Flaugier had 20. Michaela Williams had 16. Gilbert finished with 22. LSU led by 7 at half, and they actually led by as many as 18 in the ball game. But when we look at this game, and we talked about it before it happened, and I fully understand that most people aren't locked in to women's basketball yet, or any type of basketball yet, because your eyes are still on football and what football's been doing in the last month, and baseball is just a month away. But what you're seeing right now with the LSU women's team is they're poised to make another deep tournament run, as Kim Mulkey has another loaded squad. But in this game, we told you that Tennessee shot more threes than anyone in the country, and they hoisted 31 of them in this game, but they were 11 of 31. LSU, just 8 3-point attempts, 1 of 8. Very interesting and contrasting style. Tennessee shot a ton of threes. LSU barely shot any, and they both scored just about the same amount of points. LSU led 26-17 after the first quarter. They led by 7 at half, and Tennessee outscored LSU in the second half, but the Tigers were able to get it done. There were 2 things we talked about. Number one, of course, was the fact that both teams were amazing scoring teams. Tennessee number 1, LSU number 3 in the country in scoring offense. So both teams scored. The big difference was defensively. Tennessee was the worst defensive team in the SEC by field goal percentage. LSU the best defensive team in the SEC by field goal percentage. And LSU was able to limit Tennessee again at just 42% from the floor and just 35% from 3. And that was enough. The other thing too, Tennessee's full court press. They lead the country in forced turnovers, and LSU in the game just 14 turnovers. Tennessee managed just 6 steals in the game. So Tigers backcourt, they were able to protect the basketball. LSU won the field goal stat and ultimately won the game 89-87. So LSU ranked 6th in the country, gets a big win over a ranked team on the road at Tennessee in dramatic fashion. So for LSU, next up, it's Vanderbilt at Florida, then a big one on January 23rd at South Carolina, at number 2 South Carolina. So that'll be the next big one for us to keep an eye on with the LSU women's basketball team. We'll see if they can get it done and keep rolling until that point. In the meantime, they moved to 18-0 and 3-0 in the Southeastern Conference. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.